Well, Matt is going to be our moderator this evening in our 19th century book club. Uh, and he's going to be talking about Jerry Casway's book, The Culture and Ethnicity of 19th Century Baseball. Wonderful book that Jerry wrote back about 20 years ago. I want to mention that about something about Jerry. Jerry was delivered the very first presentation at the very first conference that became the Frederick Iver Campbell Baseball Conference. And I remember when, he did such a great job with it. And when he was going back to his seat, I remember saying to him, but Jerry, you were only supposed to get on base. You hit a double. And anyway, uh, Jerry was a great person to me when I was a very new member of the Society for American Baseball Research, and I was doing a paper on the former 1890s uh, ace of the Phillies, Brewery Taylor, who was native to my native Staten Island. So Jerry was very helpful, and I had a great introduction, and he kind of mentored me in many ways. So, Bob, if you want to go over just a few of the ground rules, and we'll be off and running.
Well, generally for this, it's more conversational than a presentation. So you can mute yourself if you wish. Just be aware of any ambient noise in the background, and mute yourself if a dog starts barking or a werewolf wanders into your living room. So Matt, why don't you start us off?
Good evening, everyone. I see Jerry's book has brought out the finest people, save for Joanne and Dixie. But I hope you all enjoyed it. It was a quick, short book, and in speaking with Jerry, over the course of this year, this book was to serve as a primer for potential further research into the topics and the chapters that he discussed. And I believe Jerry is with us tonight, listed as Sandra Casway. Say hi if you wish, Jerry. So yeah, there he is on Zoom and muted. So good thing you didn't say anything bad, Peter.
No, never say anything. I have nothing to say bad about her.
Yeah. So I think many of us, if not all of us, are familiar with Jerry. His book on Philadelphia ballparks, or his article on Philadelphia ballparks, was included in SABR's 50 and 50 book, which you may or may not see because, screen stuff. And this one was a short little read. So we can dive right into it. There's a whole lot packed into this book. And it leads off with who played the game. We can talk about the Irish. We can talk about the Canadians. We can talk about the British. We can talk about African Americans. I'll leave it up to the group on where you would like to start first, because this book builds off of itself, and it also has individual chapters that are kind of isolated. So what really piques your interest? Any takers?
Let me ask her.
Go ahead.
The British, as were always, at least in my mind, were the cricket people as they came over. And while any number of them, including the Wrights, were involved in baseball, it seemed that they didn't, certainly not like the Irish came a couple of decades later and just dominated the game. Was that a natural progression, or was that the professionalization bringing that forward? What kind of made that change?
The change from cricket to baseball?
More British, the British being the bat and ball people, and suddenly it was the Irish were dominating by the time we get to the 1880s, I guess.
I think what we saw in the first couple of chapters identified the Irish as having, a quality sporting history. right? So with hurling primarily, and they had skills with bat and balls, whereas those in Scotland, for example, didn't. That sporting history wasn't necessarily there, um, and and Britain was kind of a combo of the two, I would suppose. Let me see if I can find that in my notes.
Was it economics? Because certainly the Irish, when they came over, were not in every strata of society, and particularly in the numbers they came over. They were in the New York and Boston and Philadelphia. They were not the cream of society.
Right.
Jerry needs to unmute.
Yeah. Are we able to unmute?
Oh,
Jerry?
I've just sent him a note. There,
Oh, there we go.
All right.
That we
Yep,
can hear
yep,
you,
we can hear
Jerry.
you now, Jerry.
Now you're off. You have to. There you are.
This puts a heavy burden on me now,
Go
to talk.
ahead.
Well, the Irish came over, as most of you know, as the lowest of the low. They didn't speak the language. They were Catholic. They didn't have really any more real marketable skills that would coincide with what American industry was going through. So they just simply took advantage of where the money was, where the attention was, and where the opportunity was. And one of those areas was, of course, baseball.
So when we're talking about immigration, a lot of Irish come over right after the famine in the 1840s, whereas many British came over earlier. So is there something to that, Jerry, where there wasn't this otherness that the British descendants had to handle, as compared to those that had Irish ancestry or had just been right off the boat?
The British had a tendency to devalue anything that was associated with the Irish. And one of those things was baseball.
Right.
Was there any difference in the attitude of the British in Canada, the British in the United States, or the colonies?
I think that jumps into religious differences, if I'm not mistaken, when we're talking about Protestant versus Catholicism, where some British clubs, or well, where some baseball clubs in Canada are split over, who's on what side of the church aisle, so to speak.
Well, the British themselves had the advantage of cricket. They played the game. The rules were rather similar, and the competition and team association was there for them. But as soon as it slid into the area of an Irish-dominated sport, they looked for ways of putting it down because everything associated with the Irish was demeaned.
Well,
So-
when the Brits immigrated, they brought their attitudes about the Irish with them.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting if you in the second chapter, which deals with the Black Americans, the Black American experience, particularly the Pythians. You can see that the association of a non-white participation didn't help the ball game or the Irish association. It was always assumed that it was really beneath the English and beneath the proper Americans.
So this is a good segue here, going between, you know, chapters 1 and 2, where chapter 1 discusses a lot of different ethnicities, as we've mentioned, and chapter 2 dives into the Black experience, and kind of juxtaposes it with that of the Irish. So, as Jerry wrote in the book, the Irish, back in Ireland, didn't necessarily have any ill will towards African Americans. It wasn't until that was a learned experience once they immigrated over here, because they're competing for a lot of the same jobs and the same wages. How does that impact the experience on the ball field?
It was just carried over. You know, the Irish brought their own insecurities and felt that any association, any of their associations would further demean or further underscore, you know, what the Irish are all about.
Go ahead, Peter.
No, I just want to add a little fuel to the fire here. uh, there's an incredible parallel in my mind uh, between the integration of African Americans into baseball. Jackie Robinson, of course, being signed in 1945, actually playing in 46 in the minor leagues in Montreal, and then playing for the Dodgers in 47. And what's kind of interesting, you know, Happy Chandler's alleged quote of, you know, if a you know a black man is going to die in Okinawa, he, meaning in World War II, he certainly belongs on the ball field in a sense. And there's that kind of parallel. I mean, there's that, you know, kind of documented about what really cracked the door was probably World War II that did much to open the door for Jackie Robinson. Well, in a very similar way, the Irish, if you know, when you look at American history, they were the cannon fodder of the Union Army. I mean, they were the cities were emptied out. I mean, one of the greatest riots in America, probably the worst riot in American history, had to do with the reaction to the Battle of Gettysburg and the Irish, you know, being essentially just drafted into the Union Army and sent off to war. And you see this huge acceleration of the Irish after them. That's the Civil War. You know, going right in just as baseball was turning to professionalism. And so the idea that they could possibly even earn a living playing baseball, combined with their new status in a sense as veterans of the Union Army, I think opened the door for many of them. My 2 cents.
So diving again into the Black experience, for the Irish and for the African American community in the United States, it's not just about playing baseball, is it? It's about increasing your stature within a community. It's connecting with others of your ethnicity or race across city boundaries, not just within your city. It's a way to bleed agency out of a system that doesn't necessarily want you to have certain opportunities, right? So we noticed that with the Pythians and their touring when they played clubs from New York and Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. What are they doing with these other clubs? What are the Pythians doing with these other clubs when they visit them, when the other clubs come to Philadelphia? We know that in the 1860s, it's popular to have a dinner. You're going to host a team, you're going to have a dinner, and you know, shoot the bull, so to speak. But for them, it's a little bit different, isn't it? How is it different?
In terms of legitimacy, uh, playing baseball in society and being and competing, for example, the Pythians played white baseball teams. That was not so great for the white teams, but it was heaven sent for the color teams because it gave them credibility. And really what they wanted was credibility. Now, whether they did it by playing ball or going into professions that were seen as non-labor was important to them. And it was simply a matter, again, of just acceptance, period. And once that was done, it opened up all kinds of doors for them. And that's why the Irish were so protective about maintaining their control of baseball. I mean, no one was more prejudiced than the Irish when colored ball players were actively sought, positions and opportunities by playing the quote national game.
Anybody else wish to chime in on the
Well,
conversation? Go ahead, Jerry.
Cindy just said, but going from city to city, that's how they spread the word. There was no national organizations, but by meeting in different cities with different ball clubs, they used the clubs and the celebratory occasions for organization and or how they would deal with the various amendments, how would they deal with separate but equal.
Right.
It was like sort of like an underground way of combating the latent racism in America.
And coordinating with these groups across city boundaries and state boundaries.
It's a very complex subject. And despite my work, I think I've only really scratched the surface. There's still more information out there. I'm led to believe that somewhere, someplace, there are the more detailed correspondence, from the Pythians discussing some of these matters. And we have some of that in the collection of the Philadelphia Library, but it gets to really the core again of racial and prejudice in America, period. And the Irish just perpetuated it, again, for their own gratification and for their own promotion.
Does what happens to the Pythians, and this for anybody in the group, does what happened with the Pythians in 1867 being denied membership in the Pennsylvania State Association and then later in December of the National Association, does that deter them from playing baseball and from trying to, promote their social class as a legitimate class of people worthy of baseball and being Americans? Does that prevent them from doing that? Go ahead, Peter.
No, matter of fact, it only intensified it. They accepted the fact that they couldn't break the color barrier, not at that time, but they were successful in integrating trolley cars. They were successful in integrating different opportunities that up to this point were seen as an exclusive realm, again, of color. the important thing is that, you know, the momentum was on their side. And I think that even the Irish, as they began to find themselves in a different class, in a different economic opportunity, they began to realize the how difficult it was to maintain that same attitude and position. And I think it ultimately weakened their claims about the exclusivity, again, of color.
Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Pythians are a very unique situation in that they end up in 1867 being kind of, well, first in a kind of backhanded way, you know, being betrayed uh, in their attempt to join the Pennsylvania State Players Association. And then, of course, right on top of that, shortly thereafter, the National Association of Baseball Players draws the color line in a sense. And what I see in what much of what the Pythians did in studying that in a number of different other books is that they also took the opportunity to network. They took the opportunity to play with other black teams from other cities and took that opportunity not only to socialize with them, but to also sometimes discuss what was the political future for them. And, you know, naturally, I mean, Caddo's assassination in 1871 was really, you know, a huge setback in a sense, you know, for the whole movement in a way, because he had that vision of, you know, trying to eventually integrate the game. And the other thing about Irish Americans, Joanne will appreciate this because she was all part of it and made it help make it happen, is one of the graves we marked was Andy Leonard's. And Andy Leonard is perhaps being born in Ireland, I think 1846, and coming as an infant in the middle of the potato famine to establish the, you know, the presence in the United States. And at that dedication, Andy Leonard died in the early 20th century, in the opening years of the 20th century. At that event were some of his grandchildren who were born in the 19-teens and 1920s after he had passed on. Some of his grandchildren were born subsequently in the Boston area, many of them. And it was a very interesting experience. In fact, they even waited to have a priest at the dedication of the stone for this priest to return from Ireland. He was an American priest, but was an Irish American priest. And they waited for him to return from Ireland. And he had that great sense of humor when he said, yeah, I could have played the game, but I couldn't hit a curveball. And then he reminded everyone that baseball was in the first book of the Bible, in the beginning.
To conclude, since we've hit chapter 2 at 8:28, to conclude on this chapter, I just want to throw in an anecdote that in 2017, I believe it was, a statue and memorial was dedicated to Octavius Catto on the grounds of Philadelphia City Hall, and it was the first time a statue dedicated to a black man in Philadelphia had been dedicated. And the monument itself is Catto outstretched in the front, and in the foreground is a voting ballot box, and behind him are a few individual pillars of stone in the shape of a trolley car, and it's to talk about the ways in which Cato impacted society. So integrating trolley cars, the Institute for Colored Youth. Well, all the way on the right, if you're looking directly at it, all the way on the right is the athlete section, and to the side is a plaque of the Pythians, that an artist's rendition of the Philadelphia Pythians. So forever emblazed in bronze and in stone. Let's move it on to Hank Greenberg. Oh no, I'm sorry. Let's Lippman Pike. He was not too bad, right? Hit 5 dingers in one game against Danville Alerts. Danville, Pennsylvania, the home of the first iron T-rails in the United States, in case anybody wanted to know. And next door to my hometown, Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. So I took particular interest in learning that Lippman Pike tore up Danville on that one day. But Lippman Pike, hell of a ball player. I think we can all say that. But what makes and if anybody you want to jump in, what makes Lippman Pike kind of unique in 19th century baseball? Obviously, he's Jewish, but what makes his experience unique as compared to others?
I think for the most part, he was the singularity
Right.
of his appearance. I mean, he was basically alone. Now he didn't come out as a champion of Hebrew or Jewish rights, but the fact that he was there and represented that and had no qualms about the identification gave it a sense of legitimacy. And he was in baseball for a long time. He played up to the 1880s. And again, I believe the first year they were electing people to the Hall of Fame, he actually got a couple of votes. So his impact was there for all to observe and appreciate.
So Jerry mentioned here on page 39, during this age, Jews stereotypically had an identity of being non-athletic and non-virile. They were viewed as bookish and non-physical people, distinguished only by their alien clothing, language, and beliefs. And Lippman Pike is a bit unique, and we don't necessarily attach that stereotype to Lippman Pike, considering how long he played, the kind of player that he was. I mean, I found it incredibly significant that he raced a horse and won in a 100-yard dash. I don't know if that's artistic license or not. I don't really care. The story's better than the truth if it's not true. And evidently, this isn't the first sideshow that Lippman Pike participates in, and we have to remember, this is during the 1860s, 1870s, and the Panic of 1873 significantly impacts the baseball landscape, because it's cutting into finances, not just for those sponsoring clubs and benefiting clubs, but also for those people to go to games. So they're trying to get whatever money they can. One thing that I wanted to bring up that's at the back of the chapter, and did his playing for, I think it was 11 different clubs during his entire career, say something about his personality or his attitude towards money?
I think it's a combination of all of them. He prided himself on certain standards and expectations of how to play the game. At the same time, there was the economic opportunity. And number three, most of these teams, he was the odd person, or odd player out. So he wasn't always the most. He was always the most uncomfortable of all of the teammates on a particular ball club. But it's interesting to note that on most of these clubs, he was selected captain. So that must tell us something.
Jerry, was Pike a practicing Jew?
No. We know that he belonged to a Brooklyn synagogue, and he was an active member of that synagogue. But as a practicing Jew, I don't think he was, you know, I think the sport and economics took precedent over that.
Anybody else wish to add anything on Lippman Pike and the Jewish experience in 1860s, 70s, 80s baseball?
Well, we've always said that the Jews in the 19th century had speed. They were quick.
That's true. That's
They were-
true.
They were quick of foot, but they had to be.
Yeah.
What a lot of was there any connection with the next big ethnic group that came was the Germans, right? And certainly the Germany had a lot of immigration of Jews here, although they were not, if I'm not mistaken, they weren't terribly well accepted into German society.
No, again, it's like with the Irish. There was always a class structure and acceptance amongst all of these different ethnic groups. And German Jews were considered to be too bookish and much too cerebral. They weren't associated with sports or with athletics. God,
If we
I
may
didn't
now
think what
go ahead.
I didn't think what I said was that profound.
If we can turn to our Pew Bibles to page 55, Ted Sullivan and Baseball's Hibernian Spirit. I would like to rename this chapter 7 Degrees of Ted Sullivan. And how many people in baseball history actually came across Ted Sullivan or can trace themselves back to his career. Now, this chapter, I didn't get as much, I didn't feel as though it was Sullivan's actions were as directly tied to his being Irish. I could be mistaken.
Well, the big key is that he linked up with and was accepted Charlie Comiskey, another Irishman, as his protege, and Charlie Comiskey's influence and role in 19th century baseball is really significant, and in many respects, it's Ted Sullivan who plays a big role in that. I found Sullivan to be one of the most fascinating characters that I dealt with in terms of 19th century baseball. His role is really significant. And you look at the players he developed, the teams he managed, and the role he played, or the influence he had on later successful managers is significant.
Yeah, he really imparts, it seems, a whole lot of his strategy, his discipline, his organization of a ball club, and he parts this really onto Comiskey. I will say there is an anecdote in here that I really appreciate, and I just want to put it on here for posterity, that up until the break with Von der Aha, Sullivan had guided the ball club to a 53-26 record. And Von der Aha replaced Sullivan with Jimmy Williams. Comiskey stayed on as team captain. The Brown Stockings finished 1 game behind Philadelphia. What a shame. What a shame. from Famine Fields to ball fields and the front office. So we're talking about the famous foursome here. We're talking about Charlie Comiskey, Connie Mack, John McGraw, and Ned Hanlon. So, how did their experiences as ball players impact their later careers as managers and magnates?
Well, as I first introduced in the Delahanty biography, there was a distinct form of baseball that was associated with the Irish.
Right.
And the four people that you had mentioned were maybe the best proponents of that skill and of those strategies. But the significance is that if you did a family tree branching out from at least those four people, you would find that a great deal up to the 1930s and beyond, their proteges were successful. Their teams and their strategies, which they influenced, were also part of that milieu. And it's, you don't see it initially. You have to really go into the individual relationships and their influence on others to see that. And it's really interesting how all this tends to fit together, whether you go up to the 1950s or you stay in the 1890s. I mean, those relationships are there. I don't think exaggerating or the relationships, but those relationships are there and they're present. You have to make the associations.
I think Jerry, I was going to call you on this, but since you're on the Zoom call, maybe we can discuss it here since it is related. We notice with Ned Hanlon, and most of us, I believe, are familiar with him, that he creates this brand of baseball that I don't know, I might classify as a struggle. Inside baseball, smart, scientific, and trying to get the opponent or even the umpire off their game. And in the Delahanty book, you had mentioned that Ed Delahanty, I don't know if you paraphrased or quoted him, but he had lamented that they didn't play that style of baseball. And Harry Wright's in charge of that club for many of those years up until 1895. Is that they had plenty of Irish players on the Phillies and they had talent. But is this really the brand of baseball that could have solidified Philadelphia a pennant, or was there more to it than that? Was Harry Wright too passive in the era of the late 80s and early 90s?
Example, look at the Phillies today. There's a classic example of what troubled the Phillies back in the 1890s, in the beginning of the 20th century. They had great hitters who always went up there with the idea of getting a 5-run home run. They were almost the antithesis of the Irish Orioles under Hanlon and under McGraw. They didn't play small baseball. They went up there trying to overawe their opposition by their talent and by their ability. And I think the same things are troubling the Phillies today as troubled them back in the 1890s.
Well, I don't feel any better about my club going into next season now.
Listen, I've been following the Phillies since the Whiskins. So, mea culpa.
Um, and since we're talking about managers, we can build off of that, I believe, with chapter 7, the pedigrees of 19th century managers. And here we start, you know, Jerry, you mentioned we start off with pioneers such as the aforementioned Harry Wright, Bob Ferguson, Cap Anson, and then they transition to the forerunners. um, Jim Mutry, Frank Bancroft, John Chapman, Billy Barney, Billy Sharsig. Third category, followed by the Apostles, Ned Hanlon, Charlie Comiskey, Bill McGonigal, and Frank Seeley. If they wrote the Apostles, I'd read it. And then we get into I forget how we designate the disciples here. And that's where we have John McGraw, Jimmy Collins, Hugh Jennings, Fred Clark, Patsy Tabot, Connie Mack, etc., etc. So, how do these later managers, and I'll open this up to the group, how do these later managers build off of the styles that previous managers had instituted, implemented, and had learned from those before?
Just like the managing successes and the team successes under these people perpetuated by these managers promoting the whole environment that was later and you know, they called it Irish baseball, they called it Oriole baseball, they call it small ball, but you know, you play for the run, you play for the opportunity, you you make sure that every aspect of the game is used competitively on your behalf. And I just think that just the success of playing ball that way manifested this winning attitude or this bar no holds type of baseball.
I also think this chapter really offers an opportunity for anybody who wants to take this kind of research and move it further. And that's what we see with the forerunners. This group, quote, perpetuated the evolving innovations and focused on the business side of management. So we're talking about how the manager is a combined role in this certain period. And then as the 1890s progress, the on-field management kind of goes towards the field captain, while the business manager handles the business side of things, and it's the evolution of the manager. That would be an interesting article. I mentioned it. Lord knows that means I'm going to get stuck with it. But if anybody else wants to dive in, feel free.
I mean, I don't, you know, assume that my statements are the be all or end all.
Right.
I think what it comes down to is I'm just looking at the information, looking at it in a different way, and hopefully it stirs that kind of debate. Because I think baseball in its early years was very much a product of its ethnicity and its the background from which the players evolved.
Right. Yeah, and I think, and Jerry, when you and I talked several months ago, when you mentioned that this is kind of like a primer, you know, to really stoke a fire in somebody in case they wanted to carry the research on, I think so many of these chapters offer that, you know, that little bit of kindling to start the fire, and then you just run off with it, whoever that may be.
Absolutely, that was part of my intention, to be a catalyst.
Right, right. We have about 10 minutes left, and about half the book. So why doesn't somebody pick a chapter and we can talk about it? There were actually some pretty fascinating things later on in the book. Baseball, seasonal occupation. Jerry's a great Philadelphia baseball historian, so I appreciate the Philadelphia focus. Naturally, I'll be selfish here. With the two fathers of Philadelphia baseball, I thought that chapter was particularly fascinating and useful, and I'm going to take that and run with it on some other topics.
Well, it's still, as Pete, Bob can attest, I still vote for outreach and Ben Shine, continually.
Yeah, the fact that Al Reach isn't in the Hall of Fame is peculiar, considering what he meant to the game in the 1860s and to baseball overall as a manufacturer and business person, tied to the game and naturally founder of a club.
I said before, one of the objectives of this book was to stimulate and be a catalyst for additional research. This was not meant to be an end all and be all type of book. It made suggestions and brought up topics that I think really need to be evaluated in the areas that we tend to see as being fully saturated by research.
If I could, from the conversation earlier about managers and styles that they have, owners had similar styles, or at least kind of fell into different ways. You get to the Hanlons and the Wrights; they're trying to put the best team they could on the field, and then play the game in a way that helped them to win. You get somebody like Frank Bancroft, you get Jack Chapman, they would put together the best team they could put together because they had deep roots in the game throughout the country. Pull those things together and then let the players play. They didn't seem to get that involved in the game itself. Chapman and Bancroft focused an awful lot on pleasing the owner by making sure there was plenty of exhibition game and a lot of money coming in. Whereas Wright would do those sort of things, but he was also having practices like Hamlin would,
Right.
and trying to develop new techniques.
Right.
Absolutely.
Two different styles.
Yeah, and owners had the same thing. They would turn around and hire a brand new team for the next year if they didn't, if they were 15 games behind. New manager, not unlike today's. Take a look at the college football and what's happening, losing coaches in mid-season now.
You can't lose to Northwestern and expect to keep your job.
Yeah. Or Northeastern, even.
Yeah.
For you Boston folks.
I think what you're talking about is pretty interesting. And we noticed it in the Ted Sullivan chapter, particularly with his differences with Von der Aha, who was, almost like George Steinbrenner, and how involved he wanted to be on the team, right? And he arguably he's the most involved. What do we have here?
Well, the whole idea of ownership was different then, because it was a lot cheaper to get into the game,
right?
And they had trouble with franchises, so that's why Union Association ended up in Altoona. They found somebody that had enough money to put a team on the field for 14 games or whatever it was.
Right.
The classic example of what you're talking about is the experience with the American Association of the 1890s or the 1880s, where you had people jumping back and forth, which ultimately leads to the Players League, which ultimately leads to the consolidation of the leagues. But All you need to do is to look at the politics and the personnel movements of the late 1880s, 1890s, and the instability that it drove. For examples of this, of what Bob's talking about.
Well, and I'll go even further. National League had the same sort of thing. They had three dominant teams,
Right.
four dominant cities. It was Boston, Philadelphia, New York, and Chicago.
Mhm.
And they tended to make money. They also tended to win pennants, or at least be competitive in pennants. And the American Association never really had owners like that. The idea of accumulating capital that we goes, Sodden, when he decided to spend money, he spent it rather liberally, and picking up Kelly and Clarkson and whatever else he had to do, and he was building a team that into the 90s was a dominant team. I don't understand exactly how Baltimore did it, but nevertheless, I think it was the players. They had a core of players that was always competitive.
It played a big role in terms of nurturing them and molding them and shaping them to his mode of thinking and playing.
Jerry, you're a little muffled, so I don't know if you can turn your
Oh,
screen
sorry.
towards us or not, or if you have a microphone that's buried somewhere.
Around my leg.
There we go. There we go.
It really is John McGraw. McGraw recruited, trained, promoted the kind of baseball that was called, as I turned in the Callahan book, the Oriole style of baseball. But the Oriole style of baseball was again the successful playing of the game, basically small ball, which proved to be successful regardless of the decade of the 19th century. And it just worked. But it's just like today, that I use the Phillies as an example. Everyone wants to be a big hitter. They want to go where the money is, and they just go away from the practice again of just getting a man on base, moving the runners ahead, scoring, and playing the game, and take advantage of any and all opportunities. It's sort of like the survival of the fittest.
Right, right. We have but a few minutes left. I'd like to conclude my portion of this with a line from chapter 10, Intemperance on the Emerald Diamond, because I think in a way it parallels what we see today. In many instances, the men who ran baseball franchises, particularly in the American Association, also owned breweries, distributorships, and bars. A magnate might condemn excessive intoxication, but he was not going to divorce his products from the game. And if you go to a Major League Park today, you see advertisements for ESPN Bet, DraftKings, whatever it may be. And, those kind of entities being supported by commercials on Major League games. We don't want the players to bet and gamble, but we want to make money off of it.
Capitalism.
What's old is new.
Capitalism. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, for those of you who are listening to this who have not read the book thoroughly or completely, do that, because I think you'll see these themes are reoccurring and are all connected. They're all connected to each other.
Right.
And I just want to add one other thing. Matt and I are in communication where I'm going to turn over all of my research files to the Philadelphia SABR chapter for their use and the utilization. So if you see something and asking that if this is available or not available, this is the storage.
We I've been in discussion, just so Peter and Bob know and everybody else knows on the call. I've been in brief discussion with Jacob Pomrenke, and then there is going to be a way where we can get these files to SABR, or really to an entity that can really speed scan. They can scan a lot of documents, and then SABR can host all the images and scans on the website, so it'll be accessible not just for the Philly chapter, but really for the rest of the SABR membership. Which Jerry, you've got a long career in baseball history and researching, and I think a lot more than just the select few here would appreciate those resources.
And then all that information should be shared, because like I said before, that our writings and our papers are just the first step, as Pete can attest to. It's introducing it and taking it further and making proper conclusions from the research. That's what it's all about. Did I say that well, Pete?
That works.
Matt, thank you. Interesting conversation. A lot of ins and outs of this thing that
Yeah.
you got to start cogitating a little bit and scratch your head and say what's going on. But then there are plenty of historical evidence that these are the things that were going on, and that they continue today in one form or another. Peter, if you'd like to close up and give a little schedule that's coming up next week and next month.
Yes. So, Matt, thank you very, very much. I appreciate you doing this. Matt will be back. He hasn't exactly landed on the exact date yet, but he'll be back in the winter quarter, which is January, February, March. And of course, I'm saying to him, I'm giving you first pick. but he'll be back with Jerry's, another book by Jerry Casway about Ed Delahanty. Of course, maybe one of the greatest hitters of the 19th century. And played for Philadelphia. And so Matt will be back with that. Exactly a month from today, also on the 4th, by coincidence, it's a Thursday though, in December, we'll have Paul Langendorfer, who had to sign out here just a little while ago. But he'll be back with Tom Gilbert's book. We're discussing Tom Gilbert's book, How Baseball Happened. And that's another very intriguing book. And we'll be hearing more about that. A week from tonight, by the way, we have our 19th Century Baseball Speaker Series. It'll be with Steve Rene, and he'll be talking about baseball in the Arctic, the Canadian Arctic of the 1890s. So, whalers at bat. So
we're talking about that in the winter on purpose. It's already going to be cold.
They were playing there on purpose. It's very interesting. It's a very and a very interesting presenter who has a long career in journalism also. But anyway, so again, Matt, thank you. I want to remind everybody here that Matt also did a presentation, if I'm not mistaken, that was you, on level playing fields, which were the Murphy brothers of the same era.
Yep.
That were the pioneers of groundkeeping in baseball history. And I thank you all for joining in tonight and spending your time here with us. And we'll see you all some of you by next week, and hope to see you all back in next month. Okay.
Thanks,
Bob,
Peter.
thank you
Thanks,
very
Bob.
much.
And thanks, Jerry, for joining us.
Good night, all. Have a good evening.
And
Have a
good
good
night.
Thanksgiving if you're not can't be with us at the speaker series.
Good
Good night.
night. Good night,
Thank you.
Jerry.
See you all.